everybody. This is group activity 4 and group assignment 3. We were assigned to read a 5.3 Setting Your Strategy, Finding Your Organization's North Star case study. And we're supposed to answer 3 questions this week. How could have program theory and program logic helped prevent the problems being experienced? Well, as awkward as that question is worded at this point, I would say that the best way that the program logic could have helped to prevent some of the problems that they're having would have been to lay out a better vision and plan to know really where they were already at and what the current community needs were, and set a goal for where they wanted to be during the next 2 to 5 years for some of these grants that are long term, and better make an assessment of what was going to go on and gradually progress that with their plans, which they don't seem to have done. I think they just kind of fell into a routine, which turned into a little bit of a rut. And I think that if they would have laid out those plans and really thought that process out, they would have either sought out more appropriate types of government grants and funding and fundraising to better suit the needs of what was really needed versus just accepting what was there and building something based off of that has done well and might have been needed at the time, but did not have room to grow with the vision of North Star. The second question is, how could program theory and program logic help to solve these problems? As I mentioned, had they really sat down and addressed the problems and understood where they were starting from and envisioned where they wanted to go in the future, they would have been able to apply for more appropriate grants, more appropriate fundraising would have been done. They would have been able to also kind of address that with the people they hire, for people who are going to be more qualified to carry that forward and not just focus on one area, but be able to gradually build and focus in the long terms as well, to provide more of the services that were needed and that people generally grow into versus the same steady piece that's been at that has become somewhat stagnant and now is probably going to become an obsolete area that they won't really need much, if any, funding from. So they're going to suffer a severe cutback now. Had they used any of the planning and the logic in this to really think out this process, that all could have been avoided quite easily. Question 3 is, I'm supposed to think of an issue that I may have seen or heard about in my individual project organization, and how could program theory and program logic help with that program? I chose to do the Casper Humane Society, and Craig there really does an amazing job. The whole facility does. They're a privately owned nonprofit, and that is what's allowed them to stay a no-kill shelter with no help at all from government grants or state grants or any kind of extra assistance. They are literally completely run 100% off of just donations, people who love animals. And they really make the best use of every dollar. There is nothing there that they don't use. The planned logic and or program logic and program theory, there is nothing in that they don't use to better fund their system. And they utilize tons and tons of creative ideas from the fact that they have basically 2 different generations that work there. They don't have very many generations at all, but they have the younger kids, or the millennials, and then they have more of the baby boomers. They don't even have anybody really in a Gen X or anything like that. a lot of the people on the board, some of them are actually the children of the original founders that started back in the 60s. But they have used this by knowing exactly where they started and knowing exactly where they wanted to go in the future. And they have set goals. They've had times, yes, that have been very difficult and missed goals, but they didn't use the money for anything else. It just sat there and did what it was supposed to do, collecting and gathering and building. And then if there was something, they would sit down, reevaluate the situation, find out what it was, you know. Was it just a bad year for economy, and so therefore they were receiving less donations, or, you know, whatever other prospect or possibility could have happened. And that was really excellent, because with doing all of that and assessing those, they were able to readjust anything they needed, maybe create an additional fundraiser, or perhaps, you know, they decided, well, this is a pretty big project and we thought we'd be here, but because we see the economy is doing something very, you know, where it's slowing things down, creating problems, then they would say, you know, let's extend this out logically, you know, X amount of years. And they would extend it a little further. And if they hit their goal sooner, then that was awesome. And they would get it done, such as when they expanded and they were finally able to get their extra grass laid down for the large, to put in a larger play area so that they could exercise and play with the dogs, because they do that. They built larger kennels for all of the animals so that they could fit more in there, but it's very rare that you'll see more than one animal per kennel, which is more than sufficient room to lounge indoors or outdoors and hang out. And like I said, they take them out and they run them and play them, and the volunteers come in and play and socialize them. And they do the same thing with the cats. They didn't make their goal this year quite the way they'd hoped for building a outdoor cat area, so that they have a couple of cats. Well, they've got some animals that have been there with them for over a decade now, and people are less likely to adopt older animals, unfortunately, but they're animals they keep until they find them a forever home or until they pass on. And they're spoiled animals. I mean, they are loved and very well cared for, and the volunteers and the workers just really go that extra mile to make them family. So these animals really probably don't realize that they are homeless in any way, shape, or form, as they are very well cared for with their vet, and all their shots are always current, and they get fed good food and they're loved on. So that's nice, but they don't get to breathe the fresh air because they've got windows that don't open enough to allow for like a screen or something for them to be on, like a lot of homes would have. So that's one of their pet projects, is they wanted to put in a little screen room so that in the summertime the cats could go out and enjoy the fresh breeze and not have to be stuffed up inside all the time. And now, because they didn't make that this year, as the economy's been a little bit of a slump, they have decided to stretch that out a little bit, and they're trying to raise those donations additionally on their website, but they're also trying to do it where they can do some of the little silent auctions and little extra special drives and stuff for specifically fundraising for that and everything this season. And that has proven to work very well, and they might actually, it looks like, get their goal made by the end of 2019, I think is what I was being told their new goal was. And it's a little bit slow, but they get it. And they do this based off of the program theory and the program logic that we were reading about. And I've always found that very fascinating, because I didn't realize that that was what it was until I got to read this and have that correlation to see how they work that with my project that I had chosen. And that, I think, is very, very important. And I think had a lot of other places that, like maybe where I currently work, would have chosen those aspects, they probably wouldn't be pretty much in bankruptcy. So it can go both ways. If you use it properly, you can make the goals, but you have to be able to be willing to look at where you are now, look at where you want to be, and set appropriate goals and make adjustments as you go in order to do that. So that is my case study for this week, and I look forward to seeing, reading, and hearing everybody else's. Hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and toodles.